What's up everyone, Tara Roberts here with FantasyPros, and we are talking Panic Meter, what players have us terrified in Week 15. But before we get started, if you want a chance to win a signed Trayvon Diggs Dallas Cowboys mini helmet, courtesy of our friends at Pristine Auction, you need to subscribe to the FantasyPros YouTube channel right now. Comment below on this video, and that's it. Make sure to turn on notifications to know when new videos drop, and to find out if you've won. Now let's go ahead and dive right in. Let's kick things off by talking about the Panic Meter grades. The first grade is 0. This past week was not ideal, but it can be chalked up as an anomaly. Don't even think about benching them. For Panic grade 1, panic is setting in. The leash becomes shorter, but said player is still in contention as a starter. Just make sure that there's a plan B in place. For Panic grade 2, we are officially panicked, exploring trade options and possibly benching for a more proven and reliable option. For Panic grade 3, fire sale. Get rid of them right now for whatever you can before it's too late. They can no longer be trusted as a starter. They're a borderline drop candidate. And the worst panic grade is 4. Sever all ties. Smash the drop button so hard that the man ends up in the shadow realm. Let's kick things off at quarterback. Tom Brady, quarterback, New England Patriots. Tom Brady and the Bucs got thumped in Week 14 in a way that you can't even begin to describe. Brady completed 34 of a whopping 55 attempts for 253 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. No Tampa Bay receiver exceeded 10 fantasy points in full PPR. Brady has exceeded 20 fantasy points just once in 4-point per passing touchdown leagues this season. He's just not a top 10 option at quarterback anymore. And this week he faces Cincinnati, an excellent pass defense. It's possible that the Bucs struggle to stop Joe Burrow, and Brady has to chase points, but we saw that game script last week and it wasn't pretty. Let's go ahead and rip off the band-aid. Brady is a panic grade 3. The only reason that it's not a 4 is because there are too many injuries around the league to justify dropping a starting quarterback who throws to Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. Tua Tagovailoa, quarterback, Miami Dolphins. Let's revisit a quarterback from last week's Panic Meter video, Tua Tagovailoa. Are we upgrading the Panic Meter for Tua? Well, Week 14 was undeniably bad. Tua completed 10 of 28 passes for just 145 yards and a touchdown, to Tyreek Hill, of course. Since his bye week, Tua has had a max of 15 fantasy points. He went from unstoppable with 3 straight games of 3 touchdowns to incredibly average. I don't wish Tua's upcoming schedule on any quarterback. He faces Buffalo, Green Bay, and New England. In Week 1, he faced New England with just 14.8 fantasy points. In Week 3, he faced Buffalo with just 11.4 fantasy points. Tua is a panic meter grade of 2. It is time to bench him. Nick Chubb, running back, Cleveland Browns. Deshaun Watson is back in action and Nick Chubb has left the building. Are we panicking about Nick Chubb? The return of Deshaun Watson was supposed to open up the offense, provide less sack boxes, and more goal line opportunities. And absolutely none of that has come to fruition. On top of all of that, Kevin Stefanski seems a bit confused about how to utilize his running back. Against Houston in Week 13, Chubb had just 17 carries. That is horribly low, facing a team that is known as the literal worst run defense in the league. And while the Week 14 matchup against Cincinnati was tough, 14 carries is just sad. Chubb has had 8 fantasy points for 2 straight weeks. I am giving Chubb a panic meter grade of 1. I'm getting a bit worried. The schedule ahead is tough and the offense just isn't clicking. Travis Etienne, running back, Jacksonville Jaguars. Let's do one more repeat offender. Are we panicking about Travis Etienne? Well, we certainly are now. I mentioned in last week's video that the upcoming schedule was brutal for Etienne, but the justification for not panicking was that he has pass catching upside. A running back with true receiving work doesn't have to fear bad matchups because receptions are king in PPR. But Etienne had 17 carries for 32 yards and 0 receptions on 0 targets. That's just not going to cut it. The Jags face Dallas this week, followed by the New York Jets, two top 10 run defenses in DVOA and fantasy points allowed to running backs. In Week 17, the Jags face the Texans, a traditionally awful run defense, but you have to get to Week 17 to take advantage of that. Travis Etienne is a giant leap to panic meter, grade 2. I'm struggling to feel comfortable with him in my starting lineup. Michael Carter, running back, New York Jets. Just how panicked are we about Michael Carter? If we've learned anything about Michael Carter this season, the Jets just don't view him as being capable of being a workhorse running back. The absence of Breece Hall should have opened up opportunities for Carter, but since Hall's injury, Carter has been RB 47, averaging 7.4 fantasy points per game in PPR. And when Michael Carter suffered an injury in Week 12, Zonovan Knight stepped up as the lead back, and he's just not letting go of that role. Last week, Knight had 17 carries to Carter's 5, his lowest of the season. I am giving Carter a panic grade of 3. Keep him away from your starting lineup. Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, Detroit Lions. Jared Goff threw 3 touchdowns to Lions receiving corps last week, and none of them was to Amon-Ra St. Brown. Should we be concerned? As long as St. Brown has been healthy, he's seen a minimum of 8 targets in every single game he's played in full. That's about as reliable as it gets. His yardage does fluctuate, and this is just one of his low yardage weeks. But 68 yards on 9 targets is a pretty decent floor. St. Brown gets a panic meter grade of 0. You cannot afford to sit him under any circumstances. Jaylen Waddle, wide receiver, Miami Dolphins. We talked about Tua, so let's talk about his panic-worthy teammate, Jaylen Waddle. Waddle has averaged less than 10 fantasy points in full PPR over the past 4 weeks. Tyreek Hill seems to be matchup-proof and finds a way to excel. But if Tua struggles, it has a significant effect on Waddle. We talked about Tua not being a good start in his upcoming matchups, but I'm on the fence with Waddle. He's had solid fantasy outputs in early matchups with New England and Buffalo, but they were big play dependent. Waddle is a panic meter grade of 1. Weigh your other options and bench him if you have a more reliable player. Marquise Brown, wide receiver, Arizona Cardinals. Should we be concerned about Marquise Brown? Brown returned to action after a 5-game absence, and the result was his 2 worst fantasy performances of the season. And it's definitely not a limitation issue. Brown has played nearly 100% of snaps since returning and seen 8 targets in both games. The result has been underwhelming, and he's simply a guy who is just the second option on his team. To make matters worse, Kyler Murray tore his ACL and is out for the season. I am giving Brown a panic meter grade of 2. There's very little upside for him, and Arizona is a sinking ship. Mike Evans, wide receiver, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Do we believe that Mike Evans can turn his season around, or is it time to call it quits? The last time Evans exceeded 10 fantasy points in PPR was way back in Week 8. It is painful to even consider benching Mike Evans, but if you haven't already done it, you should have done it a couple of weeks ago. Evans has had just 2 top 12 finishes at the position this year. He is wide receiver 23 in PPR. His targets have been inconsistent, and that's not unusual for Evans. He's been that way before. But what's missing from the equation is touchdowns. Evans has 3 touchdowns this season, and the last touchdown was in Week 4. Without touchdowns, he is not a reliable fantasy asset. Evans is a panic meter grade of 3. Bench him. Mark Andrews, tight end, Baltimore Ravens. Is it time to panic about Mark Andrews? This is a very tough situation. Mark Andrews was tight end 23 in PPR in Week 14. Andrews was outscored by Shane Zylstra, Will Dissly, and both Philadelphia backup tight ends. Andrews is a top-tier tight end, but he's no stranger to giving you bust games. It's just that his floor has been unreasonably low this season, at 0. His actual floor is 0. And coincidentally, the only game when he had 0 receptions was in Week 7 against Cleveland. And guess who the Ravens have on deck? Cleveland. The Browns are a legitimately terrible matchup for tight ends. Mark Andrews' panic meter grade is technically a 1.5. Yes, I am cheating. He is somewhere wedged in between because he's still Mark Andrews. But it is extremely difficult to trust him this week. I'd bench him for someone more reliable. But this is the tight end position. No one is reliable outside of Travis Kelce. Thanks for watching this video. And remember, if you want a chance to win a signed Trayvon Diggs Dallas Cowboys mini helmet courtesy of our friends at Pristine Auction, you need to subscribe to the FantasyPros YouTube channel right now. Comment below on this video and that's it. Make sure to turn on notifications to know when new videos drop and to find out if you've won.
Thanks for tuning in to the FantasyPros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at FantasyPros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.